Garry Mauser, or whatever, who's coming in by video conference.
Hello, can you see me?
Oh, hello, Mr. Mauser. My name is Deborah Russell. I'm the chair of the Finance and Expenditure Committee. We're ready to hear your submission if you're ready to talk to us now. We lost him, or?
We've lost him.
Is it? Oh, here he is. Oh, hello, Mr. Mauser. We have 5 minutes with you, and we're ready to hear your submission if you're ready to go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I am Garry Mauser, Professor Emeritus at Simon Fraser University in British Columbia, Canada. I have published extensively in academic journals on firearms and crime and have testified as an expert witness on criminal justice issues before the Canadian Parliament. When I conducted my first study on gun control, I believed I would find it had been effective. It was not. I was surprised, so I dug deeper into the question. What I found shocked me. There was no convincing research that supports effectiveness of strict gun regulations or gun registers. It is my hope that New Zealand will be able to learn from the sad history, the failure of the Canadian gun register. In my opinion, the arms legislation bill has two fundamental flaws. First, it exaggerates the threat of firearms and ignores others. There are many effective ways to kill other people than firearms. Knives, clubs, improvised bombs, cars, trucks, airplanes. Second, this legislation imposes a heavy regulatory burden upon law-abiding people, people who pose virtually no threat to public safety. According to the New Zealand police, legal firearms are used between 4 and 5 times per decade. That's a slender reed upon which to inflate government bureaucracy, a bureaucracy that will divert resources, scarce resources, from more effective crime-fighting efforts. The failure of the Canadian experiment is a striking example. After 12 years and spending more than $2 billion, the registry remained shockingly incomplete with many errors. No technically competent study has provided evidence that the Canadians reaped any benefits from this expenditure of funds. As you can see in this chart, the Canadian homicide rate fell less than the American homicide rate over the time frame of the registry. In order for a firearms registry to be effective, Judge Thorpe argued that you needed a threshold of 90% compliance. Even after 2 decades, no more than 60% of Canadian firearm owners complied. Legislation in any realm can only work if citizens accept it. Drug laws, sexual mores, racism, guns. A report by the Auditor General of Canada revealed that corruption was rife within the Canadian firearms program. The scandals she uncovered were critical in bringing down the government. Even if firearm owners comply, taxpayers may not tolerate a large increase to their tax burden. The New Zealand Arms Bill imposes painful costs on the public. Large, complex governmental programs in any country offer rich opportunities for corruption. To conclude, I urge you to read my submission where my claims are better documented than this brief presentation. I will conclude by pointing out that spree killers are rare and impossible to predict. Another one is inevitable. how will you justify the ineffective, if massive, police bureaucracy created by this legislation? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mauser. We have time for one question. David.
Yes, thank you, Professor Mauser. I just wonder about your response to one argument people frequently make, which is, oh yes, the long gun registry was a failure in Canada, but it was done eons ago in terms of the development of digital technology. Is it possible that it could work now with better digital technology? And if so, are there other countries which have more successful registries than Canada had?
The problem is primarily human, not technical. The New Zealand police in the 80s and 90s told the Canadian government, who consulted with them at the time, that it was not a possible process. First of all, people don't really understand their own firearm, and that means that the government must contact, either by telephone or by personal visit, the people who want to register firearms. This is a very expensive procedure. In Canada, after the cost got to $2 billion, the government began limiting this consultation process, and that is, as you can tell, the source of many of these errors. The costs are much higher than you've been told. Does that help answer your question?
So you're saying that no amount of technology can fix it?
Yeah.
There is not a technical problem. It's a problem of human consultation. It just takes a lot of money, a lot of time, and few governments are willing to do that.
Thank you, Professor Mauser.
Okay, thank you, Professor Mauser. We appreciate you putting in a submission and making the time to speak to us. Must be evening your time, I suppose. But yeah.
Okay, thank you for having me.